was working for a local television station as a broadcast news reporter. And then I met Dave.
And her whole world changed. Somebody invited me to Seattle just to learn about church planting for 3 days. Really instantly got gripped by this sense of lostness and darkness. Yeah, it's really just well known for a lot of New Age, kind of Eastern religion. But if God's called us to this place, He's called us to plant our lives here.
We did feel like God gave us a great affirmation and a sense of peace for this particular spot for us to do His work. I just began going to a local park, and I would meet moms and just talk. That really set the groundwork for building these relationships that became friendships. And then we began meeting in our home, and then it grew. And then we made 2 groups.
Yeah.
And then that grew.
God really opened up doors at the community center.
And so when we got there, we met in one little room in the community center. And then we took the doors, the sliding doors, and we met in 2 rooms. And then last fall, we moved to the gymnasium.
Yeah, we have anywhere from 75 to 95 people on a Sunday morning. So it's exciting. It's thriving.
When people give to missions, it may seem like this very generic offering, but it turns into very significant things that we can utilize to better help us do our ministry and our work here. I was a journalist, I was a news reporter, and those things defined me. God stripped all of that away, and so it taught me to find my identity in Christ. Because when we came up here, I didn't feel capable. Like Jesus and the fishermen, he was like, come on, I'm gonna call you, be fishers of men. It's truth. And when we are able to just share that truth with people, it literally gives them hope.
King Ahasuerus needed a queen. Esther, a young Jewish woman, was being raised by her cousin Mordecai. She was sent to the palace to see if she would be queen. No one knew that she was a Jew, and Mordecai told her not to tell anyone. The king crowned Esther as his queen. One of the king's servants, Haman, planned to kill the Jewish people. One day, Queen Esther saw that Mordecai was upset. She sent for her helper and said, "Find out what Mordecai is doing and why." Mordecai told Esther's helper, "Tell her Haman has tricked her husband, the king, into making a law that all Jews must be killed. Tell her to go to the king and beg for our lives." Esther knew that if she went to the king without being officially called, he could order her to be killed. She sent word to Mordecai, "Only if the king holds out his gold scepter to me will I live." Mordecai sent word back to Esther, "Who knows? Perhaps you were made queen for such a time as this." Esther's helper told Mordecai her words, "Gather all the Jews you can find and fast for me. Don't eat or drink for 3 days. My servants and I will do the same. Then I will go to the king even though he has not sent for me. If I die, I die." On the 3rd day, Esther went to the king. The king stretched out his scepter to Esther. "What do you want? I will give you anything I have." Esther invited the king and Haman to a banquet. The king agreed to Esther's request, and he and Haman came to the banquet. Again, the king asked, "What do you want, Esther?" Esther invited the king and Haman to another banquet the next day. At the second banquet, the king said, "Whatever you ask will be given to you." This time Esther answered, "Please spare my life and the lives of my people. The evil Haman wants to kill the Jews." The king was angry and had Haman killed. He promoted and honored Mordecai. The Jewish people were so happy they celebrated all across the land.
Oh, hi there! Welcome to the library. Is something wrong? Why are you all looking at me so funny? Oh! I guess I looked pretty silly with the crown on my head. I forgot I had it on. I found it in a costume closet and thought it would be fun to wear while I read my book. People who work at a library usually don't wear crowns. Who do you think would wear a crown? I think you're right. Kings, queens, and princesses wear crowns. Do you think being a king or queen would be an easy job or a hard job? I think being a queen would be a hard job, but it would be fun wearing the crown. Let's hear a Bible story about a young woman who became a queen. Her name was Esther. A young woman named Esther lived with her cousin Mordecai. Esther and Mordecai were Jews, God's special people. Mordecai loved Esther and treated her like his daughter. One day, the king decided that he needed a new queen. The king's helpers searched for beautiful young women so the king could choose his queen. Esther was taken to the palace along with other young women. The king's helpers liked Esther, and they chose her to be one of the women taken to the king. The king loved Esther. He placed the royal crown on her head and made her queen. The king chose Esther to be his queen. The king had a party for Esther, and everyone celebrated. Haman was one of the king's helpers. Esther learned that Haman wanted to hurt all of God's people. Esther knew that she and other people she loved were in danger. Esther needed to go to the king for help, but there was a problem. No one could see the king unless he or she was invited. Going to the king without being invited could mean big trouble. Esther asked Mordecai and others to pray for 3 days and nights. Then Esther did a very brave thing. Esther said, "I will go to the king, even if it is against the law." Esther dressed in her royal clothes and went to the king. The king was happy to see Esther and asked what he could do for her. Esther invited the king and Haman to dinner. While they were at dinner, the king asked Esther again what he could do for her. Esther asked the king and Haman to come to dinner again the next night. The next night, Esther told the king about Haman's plan to hurt God's people. The king was very angry with Haman. The king chose Mordecai to write a new law so God's people would be safe. Mordecai obeyed the king and wrote new instructions. The people were very happy to be safe. Esther was very brave. She chose to do what was right, even though it was hard. God had a plan for Esther to rescue his people. God had a plan for Jesus to rescue people too. Jesus came to rescue people from sin. Sin is anything you think, say, or do that disobeys God. God doesn't want people to sin. He wants us to do what is right, even when it's hard. Thanks for visiting me today. Let's all choose to do what's right and obey God. I'll see you next time.